Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom and welcome back to today's Daf, which is Eruvin Daf Memches, where I'm Zayin Rebeis, 2 lines from the bottom. It says, Gemara Tani Rabbi Yehuda Cherem shebein tchumei Shabbos. If we have a body of water which is situated smack in the middle, between two boundaries of two cities. So we have one city on one side, one city on the other side, and lots of space in between. For instance, 4,000 amma. So the 2,000 amma, which is situated next to one city, is considered to be its boundary. 2,000 amma next to the other city is considered to be its tchum. We have a body of water which is right in the middle, right at the boundary of those two tchumen, beginning inside the boundary of one city and stretching over to the boundary of the other. Now, they made a cherem, which Rashi translates literally as meaning a fish trap, meaning a mechitza, a partition of reeds, to dissect this body of water right in the middle, so that the water is split along the boundary line. On this side, you're in the tchum of the city. On this side, the mechitza is the tchum of the other city. Cherem shebein tchumei Shabbos. Sorach mechitza shel barzel nafsika. That's not enough. You need to make a mechitza shel barzel, a metal partition, to actually seal off, to truly split this body of water. Why? Let's take a look at Rashi. Amam Zayin Amam Beis, 16 lines from the bottom, beginning with the word cherem. So cherem means a metzudas dagim, a trap designed to trap fish. Umavsik b'mayim, which is splitting right in the middle of the water. Bein beis tchumen shel beis hayaris. So it's splitting the water right at the point of the tchum boundary to separate the water which is situated in this boundary from the water in the other boundary. V'chaverei mitzudim v'charomim. Rashi brings a pasuk which contains this word cherem. So these types of nets, traps. Uksiv al kein yizbach l'charmoi. Okay. V'geder shel kanimhu. It's a fence made of reeds. So it somewhat partitions the two water, but it doesn't really seal it. There's some water that's going to penetrate inside through this geder. Therefore, it's not enough. Tzorech lasis mechitza shel barzel. You need to make a proper mechitza made of metal. Shel yavru mayim. Shel tchum zeh l'ser tchum zeh. So that the water from this side doesn't enter the other side. The choma shebetoich tchum ha'ir ein koine shvisivim koime. So actually, what's the problem? Because the water, which is situated within the boundary of a city, doesn't get its own tchum. So even though we're following Shitas Rabbi Yehuda ben Nuri, and something of hefker will get shvisa, but since it's within the city's boundaries, it doesn't get its own tchum. It doesn't get its own boundary of 2,000 am in all directions. Rather, it relates to the city. It gets connected to the city and gets the same tchum as the city. So the water which is within 2,000 of the city acquires the shvisa of the city. And until where can it be taken? Until the end of that boundary. Let's say this water is right at the end of that boundary. It's 1,999 amma from the city. You can't go take it out past 2,000. Therefore, says Rashi, that poses a concern here. That creates a concern that the people of this tchum have a problem drawing water. Why? Because even if they're going to draw water from within their boundary, there's a concern because the water is getting mixed up. Inevitably, there's going to be some water in this boundary that arrived from the other boundary. You're not allowed to move that water away from the city. So therefore, they have to create a mechitza shel barzel to seal off this body of water, so the water remains in each respective tchum, and this will prevent this concern. Continues the Gemara up on top, Memches Amar Aleph. So this was Rabbi Yehuda's halacha. You have to seal off the body of water to separate the two waters, so to speak. The water from this tchum should remain in this tchum. The water which meant to stay in this tchum will remain in this tchum. Rabbi Yehuda So Rabbi Yehuda scoffed at it. He laughed. He negated Rabbi Yehuda's statement. Says more why? My time, why did he laugh? Was it because Rabbi Chia's halacha was based on the chumrah of Rabbi Yochanan Nuri, who holds that even something which is ownerless, even a chavetz of hefker, gets shvisa. So that's the concept that this halacha was based on. Even something which is mayim of hefker will get shvisa. And what type of shvisa does it get? As Rashi explained, it doesn't get its own shvisa in this case, since it's next to the city. It relates to the city and is restricted by the boundary of the city. So the halacha here was based on Rabbi Yochanan Nuri l'chumra, v'iyus svir leikra rabbanan lekula. And Rabbi Yisrael Chanina scoffed at it. He holds, like the rabbanan, lekula, that something of hefker will not have shvisa, and therefore he didn't deem this whole process necessary, because it's hefker, it doesn't get shvisa, and therefore whoever draws whichever water can just pick it up and take it along with him. So is that the reason why he laughed? He says, well, that's not a reason. Just because he held the kula. He holds like Sheidas Chachamim, that a chavetz of hefker doesn't have shvisa. Anybody else that has a shita l'chumra, like Rabbi Yochanan Nuri, is there a reason to laugh at him? Ella, rather, why did he negate it? Misham desanya, because we have a brisa, which indicates to us that this whole process is unnecessary. This water is never kind of shvisa to begin with. Why? Desanya, naharis hamoishchet, flowing rivers, mayonos hanoivim, gushing springs, harein kirag kol adam. Since they're in motion, they're on the move during Be'ash Moshes, they're not kind of shvisa. And anybody can just pick up that water and take it along with him. Therefore, Reish Rechnina didn't deem this whole thing necessary. Water which is flowing on the move doesn't get shvisa Be'ash Moshes. There's no restrictions of tchum. Says the Gemara, perhaps this situation was speaking about not flowing water, enclosed water which is stationary, and therefore it's kind of shvisa. So what was the problem? Ella, rather, what was his problem? Mishum dektani tzorach mechitza shel barz lafsik. Because Rabbi Chia tells us, mechitza shel kanim is not sufficient, not adequate separation, because the water penetrates through the reed fence. Therefore, you need to have a proper mechitza shel barz. So the problem was that. Why? Umayshna kanim deloy. What's wrong with the mechitza shel kanim? The aili b'humaya, because water gets through and doesn't provide that proper sealing and separation. Shel barz nambi aili b'humaya. Even if you're going to make a metal wall, water's still going to get through. You can't practically, physically prevent every drop of water from penetrating the mechitza shel barz, which is situated in water. Therefore, what's the point of upgrading the mechitza to mechitza shel barz? So that was the basis of his negation of Rabbi Chia's halach. Says the Gemara, "Vil dilma tzorich vein letakana kamar." Maybe you're right. Rabbi Chia also did not really advise him to make a mechitza shel barz. He says, ideally you should have a proper mechitza, like a mechitza shel barzel, to separate. But practically speaking, even that's not going to help. Tzorich, you need to have something better. Vein letakana, but really, it's not really going to be a proper remedy. Meaning, there's no way to allow use of this body of water due to this very concern, because there's no way to really seal off the two sides of this water. So perhaps that's all he meant. So why did Yosef Hanina negate his statement? Ella, rather, the reason is as follows: because he held that there's no reason to upgrade the mechitza. Mishum dekalu shekilu chacham b'mayim. Chacham applied a leniency when it comes to partitioning water. They don't require a proper separation, as long as there's some sort of mechitza asara, which gives the impression of separation here. That's enough. Because unlike dry land, which is a place where you walk and you need to make a proper mechitza to partition two areas, one from the other. It needs to be a mechitza which actually sits on the ground and creates that separation between the two mekomis. But when it comes to water, it's not a place where you walk. It's not a proper usage area. There the Chacham sufficed with a mere mechitza that provides indication of separateness. And therefore, even this type of mechitza, cheshel kanim, despite the fact that allows some water through, that's okay. As long as it's a mechitza 10 tefachim high, and creates that indication of separateness. You're creating two separate drawing areas. These people are drawing from this side, those from the other. That's enough. As we see from Rav Tavla. Rabbi Tavla asked the following question of Rav. Mechitza tzulia. You have a hanging mechitza. So it's coming from above, but not reaching the ground below. It's 10 tefachim, but it's not actually flush to the ground. Can it permit carrying inside a ruins? Meaning, is it considered to be a valid mechitza on dry land? Amar lei, so Rav responded, no. A mechitza tliya materis, ela b'mayim. This type of mechitza will only be valid in water, not on dry land. On dry land, it needs to actually dissect the surface below the ground. But on water, that's enough. Kalu she'ikilu chacham b'mayim was a special kula that was applied by the chacham specifically for the sake of water. Let's take a look at Rashi inside, 3 lines from the top. Ella, v'shem hachim mechayach alei. That's why he left. That's why he negated him. The kalu she'ikilu chacham b'mayim. When it comes to mechitza of water, chacham applied a kula. The mechitza kodu, even just a impartial, incomplete mechitza, is enough. As long as it's 10 tefachim, that is effective for water. Although there's water going over either the top of the mechitza or the bottom of the mechitza, that's enough. And the conclusion was that even a mechitza tluya is enough when separating water. And just as a hanging mechitza is effective for water, mechitza is kanim nami mahanya. Likewise, a mechitza of kanim. The mali me'arve maya mitatoy. What difference does it make if the water is getting mixed up underneath the mechitza, which is not reaching the bottom of the riverbed? Mali me'arve bin kan lachaveir. Or if the water is getting mixed up by entering between those reeds. So either way, there's some mixture taking place. And this type of mechitza is enough. A hanging mechitza is enough. A mechitza shekanim is enough, even though some water is penetrating in between those reeds. As long as you've created that separation. You don't need to actually dissect the mokayim. You don't need to go down to the floor below and separate, absolutely seal that water off. As long as you created some appearance of separation, when it comes to drawing water, that's enough. So here you created this mechitza shekanim to create two separate drawing areas. The people of this city are drawing from this side, the other people from the other side. That's enough. When it comes to water, therefore, B'yaisi, Ruchinina maintained, there's no need to upgrade the mechitza shel kanim. Continues the Gemara. Getting back to our Mishnah, a person's stuck out in the wilderness, he doesn't have a tchum. What does he get? A shear of 4 amos, which is his personal space. And the Mishnah brings the shita of Rabbi Yehuda, who also says that a person gets 4 amos of personal space. Rabbi Yehuda in a Tanakama. The shita of Rabbi Yehuda is one and the same as the shita of Tanakama. Why that repetition? Amar Rava, there's a difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. Shmoina al shmoina, ike benaya. According to Tanakama, he's not limited to merely 4 amos. Rabbi Yehuda says he only gets 4 amos. 4 by 4, that's his personal space. You can choose in which direction you'd like to have that personal space. That's all you're going to get, 4 by 4. Whereas the Tanakama holds, sure, you're granted 4 by 4 for your personal space, but you can have it in all directions. You can have it in this direction, in that direction, in any direction you like. So that gives you a total of 8 amos by 8 amos. So an 8 by 8 square. So the big difference between Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. Tani nami hachi. We learned likewise in the Brisa. Yesh le shmoin al shmoin divrei Meir. So according to Rabbi Meir, who's Tanakama, there's 8 by 8, which is given to him. Now the point here is that, according to Tanakama, it's not that the concept changes. His personal space is still meant to be 4 by 4, but you could have your personal space in this direction, in the other direction as well, in any direction you'd like. So it's really a compilation of numerous personal spaces of 4 by 4. So the underlying concept is really the same. It's a space of 4 by 4, but according to our mayor, we give it to him in all directions. That leads us into the next Gemara. V'amar Rava, machlokes lahalach. His machlokes, meaning according to Rameh, that he gets a square of 8 by 8, that's only regarding his walking allowance. He can walk around this entire square. Aval l'taltal divrei hakoil arba amis in tveiloi. When it comes to actually carrying a chayfetz, he can't pick up a chayfetz here and walk around with it. He can't carry it more than 4 amis. Arba amis in, yes, 4 amis, yeah. Tveiloi, more than that, no. Because the restriction of carrying something 4 amis in Carmelis or in Rishus Rabbim is based on a similar concept. You're not meant to take something outside of its unit, outside of its space, which is 4 amis. Now, even according to Rameh, this person has 8 amis. The concept here is still the same. 4 amis is considered to be 1 unit. He just granted many such units. Therefore, in total, he can walk more than 4 amis. But when it comes to carrying a chayfetz, it is still limited to that 4 amis space. You can only carry within 4 amis, and no more than that. Continues the Gemara. V'hani dalad amis heicha ksiva. We learned that a person has 4 amis of personal space. Where is this hinted? Where is this concept alluded to in a pasuk? Kedesanya shvu ish tachtav. Torah says on Shabbos, a person is meant to remain in place. Shvu ish tachtav, and the pasuk includes al yetish from koyma b'yamashvi. A person shouldn't leave his place on Shabbos. Shouldn't go out of his boundary. So the Gemara makes a drasha. Shvu ish tachtav ki tachtav. The remes here is that it's referring to a person who doesn't have a tchum for some reason. So he's granted personal space. How large is personal space? Ki tachtav. As the area underneath him. The kama tachtav. How much is that? How much space? How large a space is that? Gufi shalish amas. His body is 3 amas long. And an additional amma we need, v'ammo k'dei lifshay diyoda v'ragla. So he can spread his hands and feet. So he can pick his hand above his head. So the point here is we give him an additional amma for a total of 4. That's considered to be your personal space, which is alluded to in this pasuk, shvu ish tachtav, meant to stay, tachtav, inside this personal space underneath you, which is 4 amas. Rabbi Yehuda, a similar thing, gufay shalosh amis. Person's body is 3. The additional amma is for usage space. V'amma k'dei sheyitol chayfetz metachas magalaysav, to allow him to take an object from underneath his feet, maniach metachas marashoysav, and transfer it to under his head. Meaning, you need to give him some room to move around, to metaltal chafetzim. So that gives you a total of 4 amas. So you have a 4 amma by 4 amma square. My binayu. What is the halachic difference between Rameh and Rabbi Yehuda? There's a slight difference. Ike binayu, arba amas mitzumtzamis. We know that an amma is comprised of 6 tvachim. The question is, how do you measure the tvachim, those fists? Is it mitzumtzum? You clench your fist, the fingers are situated tight and right next to each other, so it ends up being a smaller tefach, which results in a smaller amma. Or are the tefachim measured leaving your fingers loose, lying loosely? And that results in a slightly larger amma. Farshim say the difference is very small. It's a half of a etzba width. So the larger amma is a half a etzba longer than the small amma. So Gemara tells us that according to Rameir, the amma is a larger amma gedola, because Rameir describes it as the person stretching himself. So that denotes a larger size amma. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda maintains it's going to be a smaller amma, it's going to be 4 ammas, but a bit smaller. So in summary, regarding the 4 ammas, according to Rameir, he gets a total of 8 by 8. According to Rabbi Yehuda, a total of 4 by 4. According to Rameir, those ammas are larger size ammas. According to Rabbi Yehuda, smaller size ammas. Amalei Rav Mishashi Libre. Mishashi instructed his son, Ki Eilis, come to Rav Papa. When you go into Rav Papa, Boimene, I'd like you to ask him the following question. Arba amas she'amru. These 4 ammas that we spoke about, how do we measure it? Ba'amma didei yavinelei? Do we grant it to him based on his personal amma? Meaning, a person's amma is as follows. You measure from his elbow to the tip of his middle finger. That's called an amma. So is that how we measure the 4 ammas? Or do we work with a standard measurement of an amma, which was based on a yardstick in the Beis HaMikdash, which was measured based on the measurement that Moshe Rabbeinu handed down. So this is your standard amma. Which one do we want to use to measure the 4 ammis of a person's personal space? If a papa will tell you, certainly we meant to use those standard ammis. If that's the case, we have a problem. What's going to happen if a giant gets stuck out in the wilderness on Shabbos? He needs to have 4 ammis. You're going to grant him very small 4 ammis based on the yardstick in the Beis HaMikdash. He's too big to fit in there. And if he tells you, we give him the ammis based on his personal body size, so then you'll tell him as follows. Have a kasha. If it's personal, my time like tanila, why isn't this halacha listed amongst the list of many such halachas in a Mishnah in Kalim, where the Mishnah gives us a whole list of halachas that are based on personal measurements. My time like tanila, why isn't this halacha stated in that list? Gabi Yesha Amru. There are some things that the Chum said, Hakol vi mashu adam. It's based on a person's personal body size. So why isn't this included in that halacha? So either way, we have a kasha. If you're going to use standard amis, how's a giant going to fit in there? If you're going to use a person's personal amis, why isn't it included in the Mishnah? Okay. Papa. So when Rav Misharsh's son arrived before Rav Papa, and he asked him this question, Rav Papa responded, Amar lei, if we're going to analyze to this extent, ask all these kashas, we're never going to learn anything. So we're not meant to get so nitty gritty when it comes to these things. But he did answer him. He says, certainly the amas are measured based on a person's personal body size. Meant to accommodate even a giant. If so, what happened to your kasha? My time like tani gabi. Why wasn't it included in that Mishnah? The answer is because it's not an absolute formula. You can't say that we always follow a person's personal body size, because there's a case where it's actually to his detriment. If a person who's a standard sized person, but his limbs are perhaps smaller than standard. So in this case, you can't use his Eivarim because it won't accommodate him. Let's take a look at Rashi. So off to the right, about 10 lines up. He has an average sized body, but his hand, his forearm, which is being used as the amma, is short. It's small size. If you're going to use his amma, it won't accommodate him. In this case, you have to be lenient. You have to measure his forearm based on the standard amma. So the conclusion is that we follow a lenient approach. When it comes to a giant, we use his amis. When it comes to a person who it won't work out for him, if we use his amis, in that case, we use the standard size am. So in summary, when it comes to a person who is Yitzchak Chutz, we give him 4 amis. According to our mayor, we give him 4 amis in all directions, which totals a square of 8 by 8. The Gemara tells us that's strictly regarding the hiluch privilege. So you can walk all throughout that square, but being a taltal chayfetz, certainly it's only limited to 4 amis. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he gets the 4 amis in one direction, for a total of 4 by 4. According to our mayor, those amis are large size amis. According to Rabbi Yehuda, small size amis. The Gemara concludes, generally, we measure those 4 amis based on his personal body size. When it comes to this nanas, we use the amma shel kodesh. Continues the Gemara, Hayu shnayim miktzes ha'meisav shel zeh v'chulu. Just to describe the situation, we have some people sitting out in the open on Shabbos. Each one has his 4 amis. So we have 3 people. Now, we have 2 outer ones that have 8 amis between each other, in which case they don't share any space. We have a third person right in the middle of those 2. So his 4 amis are split, 2 on this side meaning he's sharing 2 with the person on his right, and he's sharing 2 amis with the person on his left. Mishnah tells us this person can actually interact with the people on the side using that shared territory. They could transfer back and forth within that shared territory, whereas the 2 outer people, the shtayim hachitzonim, who don't really share any territory, they cannot transfer anything from one side to the other. Rabbi Shimon tells us this is similar to a case where you have 3 chatzeros, 3 courtyards lined up, one next to each other. So you have 2 outer ones and one right in the middle, 2 chitzonos and 1 emtzois. Let's say the 2 outer ones decided to make an eruv chatzeros with the middle one, but not with each other. So what's the result? The outer ones can transfer to the middle one can transfer to the outer ones, but the 2 chitzonos, the 2 outer ones, cannot transfer one to the other. They can't take a kli which was present in one of the outer ones during Ban Hashmanos and transfer it over to the chatzar on the other extreme, because they don't have that allowance. They didn't make an eruv with each other. So Rabbi Shimon says this is similar to the case of the 3 people. So the 2 outer ones can interact with the middle one through their shared territory, and the middle one can interact with them, but the 2 outer ones cannot interact with each other because they don't share any territory. Says the Gemara, why was this necessary? Why did Rabbi Shimon find it necessary to illustrate the halacha of 3 people out in the field with a case of 3 courtyards? What was the point that he was making? This is what Rabbi Shimon is telling the Rabbanan. Let's take a look. What is the case of 3 people similar to? It's similar to the case of 3 chatzeros who have access to each other. They're all open to Surabim. That's the case that we mentioned, and the 2 outer ones made an eruv with the middle one, which allows them to interact with it, and it with them. But the 2 outer ones can't interact with each other. Now that sheet is Rabbi Shimon. Rabbanan hold that they're also with each other, as we're going to learn later on. Shimon wants to know, he says, look, this is so similar. The case of the 3 people, where we say the 2 outer ones can interact with the middle one with the outer ones, but the outer ones not with each other, is so similar to the case of 3 chatzeros. Why that distinction? Why in the case of 3 people do you agree? There's no problem with them interacting. In contrast with the case of the 3 chatzeros, well, you disagree with me. You don't allow this to take place. You don't allow the 2 outer chatzeros to interact with the middle chatzer. What's the difference? Why over there by the courtyards do you disagree with me? In contrast with this case of the 3 people, you agree. There's no machlekes here. Says more, there's a difference. For Rabbanan, they respond as follows. In the case of the 3 chatzeros, many people there, and many objects that are going to be transferred back and forth, and it's hard to keep track. Who's doing what? Who's transferring what? Therefore, there's a concern. If you allow even that minimal interaction to take place, so the outer courtyards are going to transfer to the middle courtyard, the middle one to the outer ones, there's a concern that perhaps it's going to result in a michshal, a pitfall. The outer courtyards will end up somehow transferring to each other as well. So therefore, we disagree. We don't allow that to take place. We don't allow the outer ones to interact even with the middle one. Contrary to our case, we just have 3 people here. 2 people, 3 people. Not too many people here. It's easy to keep track, and there's no concern that they'll do something wrong and they'll transfer inappropriately. Therefore, in this case, certainly they can transfer to each other through their shared territory. Continues the Gemara. This is the case of the 3 chatzeros lined up next to each other. And what happened was that the 2 outer ones made an eruv with the middle one. So they're allowed to transfer to the middle one, and vice versa. But the 2 extreme chatzeros didn't make an eruv with each other. Therefore, they're prevented from transferring to each other. Says the Gemara, why? Va'amai. Kiv and the arviluhu chitzonis v'adem tzois. Once the outer ones made an eruv with the middle one, and let's assume that the eruv bread was placed in the middle chatzar. So once that happens, havilu chada. All 3 chatzeros have now merged together. They've become one usage area. Because once the outer ones made an eruv with the middle one, placed some food there, it's as though they're living there. And they've all just joined together into one happy family. So just as they can transfer to the middle one, the middle one to them, they should be able to transfer to each other as well. Rabbi Yehuda, when I'm speaking about that case, they didn't place the Eruv in the middle one. What happened was, at the middle Chatzar, when he wanted to connect himself to the outer Chatzeris, what did he do? He placed his Eruv in the outer Chatzeris. Let's take a look at Rashi. 2 lines from the bottom, the last word on that second line, Shenasna emtsoy eruva bezu bezu. So he placed his Eruv in the outer courtyards. The Dami emtsoyis kilodara behen. This creates a situation where it appears that the middle one is living with them. However, they're not living in the middle one. Therefore, it doesn't allow us to say that they're all living together in one area, and they're one combined entity. We don't say that because the bread of the Eruv was placed in the outer ones. So we have one Eruv placed on this side, which combines the outer one with the middle one. One Eruv placed on the other outer one, which combines that chatzah with the middle one. But the two outer ones have no relation to each other. They're unconnected. And therefore, they cannot transfer one to the other. That's Rabbi Yehuda's approach. Rav Sheshes Amar, afilu teima, shenasnu Eruvin be'emtzois. Even if we're speaking that they placed the Eruv in the middle one. The kasha was, if so, why don't they all bond together, combine into one usage area? Kegoin, we're speaking about a case, shenasnu b'shnei batim. They placed the Eruv in the middle chatzar, but in two separate homes. Let's see Rashi on top. B'shnei batim, the hashali mechabron chitzonis ba'adadi. In which case the two outer ones won't join, won't connect with each other. Because we have two separate Eruvs, placed, although in the middle chatzar, but in two separate homes. So there's no true connection between the two outer chatzars. Continues the Gemara. Kiman ki Beishamai. Are we following Shittas Beishamai, who holds that that's considered to be a separation? The Sanya, Chamisha Shagavos Eruvin. We have 5 people living in a chatzar. They collected their Eruv material, and it's no b'shnei kelim. They placed it into two kelim. Beishamai ein Eruvin Eruv. It's invalid. It's meant to be joined together. It has to be in one kli. That merges the usage, the ownership, the residence. But if it's 2 kelim, you've made 2 separate collections, 2 separate Eruvs. It doesn't work. Still, Eruvin Eruv. It does work. So Rav Sheshes tells us that they placed it in 2 homes. That's considered to be 2 separate Eruvs. Is he following Beishamai, who holds that to be a problem? Says no, afilu tema Beisil. Rav Sheshes could be following even Shittas Beisil. How? Ad kan leka amri Beisil hasam. It's only over there that Beisil maintained that a split Eruv somehow joins together and is regarded as one and the same Eruv. That's only ela b'shnei kelim v'isechad. In a case where, although it was split into 2 kelim, but ultimately it was sitting in one home, and that bais echad has the ability to join them together, combine them into one Eruv. But if the Eruv was split into 2 homes, in this case, there's no way to join them together. Okay, so at this point in the Gemara, we have 2 answers to our kasha. What was the kasha? We have 3 chatzeris, and the 2 outer ones establish an Eruv with the middle one. Mishnah tells us they can transfer to the middle one, and the middle one can transfer to them, but the 2 outer ones are unconnected, cannot transfer to each other. The kasha was, but once they made an Eruv with the middle one, then automatically they all joined together as one. We have 2 answers. Reader says the Eruv wasn't placed in the middle one, rather it was placed in the outer ones. In which case, there's no reason for us to go ahead and join and combine all of them together. Rav Sheshes says it was placed in the middle one, but the 2 Eruvs were placed in 2 separate homes. Therefore, the 2 outer ones have no connection with each other and don't combine into one usage area. So we have 2 answers. Says the Gemara, Amalei Rav Acha B'eder Rav Avia. He asked the kasha Rav Ashi. I have a problem with both approaches. The Rabbi Yehuda kasha, the Rav Sheshes kasha. I have a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda's teretz, and likewise on Rav Sheshes teretz. Explains the Gemara. The Rabbi Yehuda kasha, what's my kasha on Rabbi Yehuda? The Amar, because he said, Kigon shenasna emtsois, Eruva bezu, Eruva bezu. We're speaking where the middle one placed its Eruv in the outer ones. He placed Eruva bezu, Eruva bezu. So he placed an Eruv in the chatzah to his right, and an Eruv to the chatzah to his left. So the problem is, The kivan the irva emtsois ba'ad chitzoina. Now, once he's accomplished that first step, he made an erev with the chatzar to his right. What happens then? Havi lechada. The middle one and the right are considered to be one and the same entity. That's the point of the erev, to bond them, to make them join together into one usage area. So once you've accomplished that, the middle one and the right one are considered to be one entity. Now when he proceeds to phase 2 of the process, he's going to make an erev with the chatzar to his left. When he proceeds to make an erev with the other one, he's not only making an erev for himself, because he's no longer a separate independent entity. He's already connected with the chatzar to his right. He has done a service, a shlichus, for the chatzar to his right as well, meaning the erev that the middle one is making with the chatzar to his left is not only on behalf of his own self, it's also on behalf of the chatzar to his right, with which he had already joined and bonded together. It's considered to be one and the same entity. So when he makes an erev with the chatzar to his left, why isn't this considered to be an erev accomplished also for the chatzar to his right, to the outer chatzar? So this should result in all the chatzeris joining together and allow us to transfer freely from one to the other. So that's the kasha according to Rabbi Yehuda. What's the kasha according to Rabbi Sheshes? Well, Rabbi Sheshes' kasha. Sheshes tells us that we're speaking where they placed the erev. There were 2 erevs, and they placed it in the middle chatzar. Why does not affect a combination? Why doesn't that connect everybody together? Because it was in 2 separate homes. Says we have a problem with that. If it's in 2 separate homes, that shall actually ruin the entire system. Let it be similar to the case where you have 5 people living in one chatzar who need to join together in one erev. And what happened? They made an erev, but one fellow forgot and didn't join the erev. What happens? The Asri Adadi. Certainly, they all prohibit each other from carrying because they haven't properly joined together in an erev. As Rashi points out, even if, let's say, this fellow made an erev with another member of his chatzar, but didn't properly join with everybody else. So you have 5 people, 4 properly joined together, and 1 only decided to join with his friend, with one other person, not with everybody together. So it's like 2 separate erevs, and it doesn't work. You haven't really joined and bonded everybody together as one. So here as well, when the 2 outer courtyards placed their erev in the emtsois, in 2 separate homes, the fact that they placed the erev there, let it be regarded as though they're actually living there. So now if everybody's living in one chatzar, but they're split with their erev, they made 2 separate erevs, it doesn't work. What's the result? You can't carry throughout the chatzar at all. So we have 2 kashas. We have kasha on Yehuda. Why isn't everybody mutter? And we have a kasha according to Sheshes. Why isn't everybody also? Amalei Ravashi. So Ravashi responded, none of these kashas are difficult. Lo Rabbi Yehuda kasha, lo Rav Sheshes kasha. Why? Rabbi Yehuda kasha. What was the kasha according to Rabbi Yehuda? Once the middle one established an erev with the chatzar to its side, it has bonded and joined with it, and now when he proceeds to the next step, it makes an erev with the chatzar on the other side. Why can't he bring along the outer chatzar with him? Says the Gemara, like kasha, it's not a kasha. Even the erev emtsois ba'ad chitzoina or ba'ad chitzoinos. Since we're speaking about a case where specifically the middle one made an erev with the outer ones, but the outer ones didn't bother making an erev with each other. The 2 outer ones didn't bother making an erev with each other. So what does that demonstrate? What does that indicate? They're not interested in connecting with each other. Gal Yadaite, that demonstrates, that indicates the Baha Nichale, Baha Nichale, that the outer one wants to be connected with the middle one. He doesn't want to connect to the chatzar on the other extreme. So here we have a clear indication that we're not meant to join them together. So what was the kasha? Let them automatically join? They don't want to join together. Therefore, we leave it as is. That they can interact with the middle one, and vice versa, but the 2 outer ones are also with each other. So that answers that kasha. Likewise, the kasha asked according to Sheshis will be answered as follows. What was the question? Once they place the Erev in the middle chatzar, let it be regarded as though they're living there. And since they're living in one chatzar, they need to make one single Erev. In contrast with this case where we have two separate Erevs sitting in two separate homes, this should make everybody asa with each other. You know what the answer is? They're not actually living there. Im amru diyurin lahakil, yoimru diyurin lahachmer. This concept that where you place an Erev is considered to be your place of residence, that only works, that's only applied if it results in a kula. The entire concept of Erev Chatzeres, let's keep in mind, is to allow. Right? Shlomo Melech made a gzera. We don't transfer from a person's private home to the shared courtyard. It's like taking from one type of rishus to the other, which can be confused with Shzechar Sarab. So we're meant to go ahead and join forces. Merge the usage of the Chatzer. Let it be considered like all one big usage entity, one big rishus, in order to result in heter, to allow carrying throughout the area. The point of joining forces, the point of creating that area is to result in heter. What if it's going to result in isser, such as in this case, where you're proposing the fact that they put an Erev in the middle one, let it be regarded as though they're living there, and therefore, if they're living there, they need to join with each other. They're not joining, so it's usser. We don't apply that concept if it results in an isser. Im amru the urine lahakal. If the Chacham applied the concept of the urine, that when you place the Erev, that's where you reside, lahakal, to affect a kula. Yoimru the urine lahachmer. Do you think they're going to apply the concept of the urine if it results in a chumrah? No, they won't do that. Let's take a look at Rashi. Off to the left, 3 lines down. Im amru the urine. Shel zu bezu adei Erev lahakal. If we apply this concept that it's as though you're living in the place where you place the Erev. They said in order to affect a kula, la'atira nyacha, to allow them to carry with each other. Yoimru she'erev meiri, do you had urine, l'soicha kadei l'esher leo? Shall we say that, let's apply this concept, that the Erev brings them into the area in order to affect Isser? We don't do that. They're not practically living there. Sure, if people are living together in the same chassid, they need to establish a proper Erev. But in this case, they're not actually living there. They're lebay Eruvin v'esechad, which would require them to place an Erev in one home. So since they're not actually living there, therefore, even in this case, that the two outer ones have not made an Erev with each other, there's no harm, because there's no need for them to make an Erev. They don't live together in the same chatzah. Nevertheless, the outer one will be mitzaref with the middle one, to allow transferring back and forth. But the two outer ones don't cause any harm, don't make Isser, because they don't really need to make an Erev with each other. So in summary, Reb Shimon tells us, we have sholish chatzeres next to each other, and the Imtsois made an Erev with the Chitzonis. The halacha is, he can transfer to them, they can transfer to him. But the Chitzonis are surah zemzu, they can't transfer from one to the other. We have 2 approaches to this halacha. Rabbi Yehuda tells us we're speaking where the Erev was placed in the Chitzonis. They were placed in the outer courtyards, because had they been placed in the middle courtyard, that itself would combine them all into one entity, and allow them to transfer freely back and forth. Now the kasha was, well, if the Imtsois first made an Erev with the Chatzer to his right, so that combined them together. And now, when he proceeds to his next phase, to make an Erev with the Chatzer to his left, why don't we say that since he's already been bonded with the Chatzer to his right, it's become one entity, so now when he makes an Erev with the Chatzer to his left, he's bringing along the Chatzer to his right as well. And it's becoming all one Erev. The answer is, because the fact that the Chetzonis chose not to make an Erev with each other, that indicates they're not interested in connecting to each other, and therefore they remain separate. Rav Shesha's approach was that certainly the Erev was placed in the Imtsois, but in 2 separate homes. Therefore, the 2 outer courtyards don't join with each other. The question was, if the Erev was in the Imtsois, let it be considered as though the outer courtyards are actually living in the Imtsois, in which case they need an Erev with each other. The Gemara tells us, we don't apply this concept of the urine lahachmer. Why don't we say that the Chitzonis are mutter with each other? The answer was because the Erev that they made with the middle one was placed in 2 separate homes, in which case the 2 Chitzonis don't join, don't combine with each other, and they remain usher to zu imzu. Okay, time for a brief review of today's daf. We began with the pond, which was right in the middle of the 2 tchumen of the 2 cities. Rav Chia required an enhanced hefsek and mechitza within 2 portions of water. Rabbi Yehuda says it's unnecessary because it's merely water. As long as you've created that mechitza shel kanam to indicate that you're drawing from two separate areas, that's sufficient. If a person finds himself out of the tchum, he gets 4 amis. What does that mean? According to Rav Meir, 4 amis in all directions, for a total of a square of 8 by 8, in which he can walk freely. He can only carry 4 amis at a time. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he gets 4 amis in one direction, and that's it. A total of 4 by 4. What size amis are we speaking? According to Rav Meir, larger size. According to Rabbi Yehuda, a bit smaller. How do we measure these amis? We use his own amma, from his elbow to the tip of his middle finger, to accommodate a giant. Now, if this person is a nanas be'ivarav, he's a medium-sized person, but his limbs are small, in which case, if you use his own measurements, it's not going to accommodate him. In this case, we use the standard amma, the amma shel kodesh. The Gemara told us if we have 2 people out in the open who have some shared space, then certainly they can transfer within that shared space. Rabbi Shimon says the same thing applies to 3 chatzeros, which are lined up next to each other, and the 2 outer ones made an area with the middle one. They can share with the middle one. The middle one can share with them. The 2 outer ones cannot share with each other. And we have 2 approaches how to understand this halach.